Blanco. All right, perfect. So Eduardo, thank you. Welcome. We welcome our speaker from the California Agriculture Labor Relations Board. The California Agricultural Labor Relations Board was created in 1975 to ensure peace in the fields of California by guaranteeing justice for all agricultural workers and stability in agricultural labor relations. The board seeks to achieve these ends by providing orderly processes for protecting, implementing, and enforcing the respective rights and responsibilities of employees, employers, and labor organizations in their relations with each other. And Eduardo Blanco graduated from UC Davis School of Law in 1980. He has worked for the Agricultural Labor Relations Board continuously since 1980. He has spent most of those years working for the General Counsel's office and has held various positions within management, including Deputy General Counsel. Since 2016, he has been working directly for the board as a special legal advisor. In that capacity, he was given the primary responsibility of education and outreach to the cannabis cultivator community and their employees. He has previously spoken at NCIA, CCIA events, and statewide to gatherings of cannabis cultivators, both large and small, raising awareness about the function and importance of the labor law to cultivators and their employees. So welcome. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say tonight, truly. Sure. And as you know, last month we had a couple guests that were from UFCW 324, Andrew Hauserman, and we learned of the reasons for working with a union. UFCW 324 represents over 500 cannabis workers in California and helping secure better wages, protection from unfair discipline, and great benefits. Could you please just start off and tell us what ALRB does to help workers employed in the cannabis space?
Well, what we do with cannabis workers isn't any different from what we do in the rest of the agricultural industry. The law applies equally to everybody that's employed in agriculture. And with respect to employees, we have a team that goes out and speaks to workers in different events to try to educate them about what their rights are. In the cannabis space, that's primarily my duty. And we've been doing that several ways. Working with unions to talk to the workers that they're trying to organize. And like career fairs as well in the cannabis industry. We go there and hopefully have that opportunity to speak to workers as they're waiting for potential interviews with employers and that kind of thing. So that's how we've been reaching them in terms of what their rights are. But at the same time, we're also very keenly aware that the cannabis industry is, in terms of employers, is a fairly new one when it comes to legalized businesses. And even though there may be very many businesses that have been around for years, for decades, even, they've never operated within the regulatory space of the state's workplace regulations. So they don't know themselves, they don't know about those rules and that are there to protect their employees and basically require them to do or not do certain things at the workplace as employers. And also we've seen that with equity employers and especially those localities that signed up for getting equity funds from the state, creating training programs. We've been trying to work with those programs to provide another layer of education beyond that we've been giving to other non-equity employers in the industry and cultivation, because we recognize that they are probably very new to being business people, to being entrepreneurs. They may not have the money to hire an HR consultant or have an HR staff person that's going to advise them on the different issues that are going to come up with respect to human relations as it were, and labor law is part of that tapestry of HR issues. So, we've wanted to help them get that information that they, at least so that they know where to go with any questions they might have to the various agencies, be able to shape questions for an HR person, an HR specialist or an HR attorney, so that they're not wasting their money, so they actually have the question, down to what it is that they really need to know. So we've been helping in that way as well. I think the monies that they're getting from the state are to help people get to the point where through the licensing process, but beyond that, to help them succeed once they open their doors. And we know that there's a variety of these workplace issues that can, if you step the wrong way, you're stepping into something that may cost you your business, because the fines and penalties can especially if you have a very narrow profit margin, can actually make you close your doors. So we wanted to help in that direction as well. And in that process, I partnered with Cal OSHA and Department of Fair Employment and Housing as partners who are equally interested in this concept of giving greater information to equity employers and equity employees, because there's a lot of those are going to be first-time employees. In fact, across the industry, even if you're not in equity, many of the employees are going to be first-time employees and don't know about, what the overtime rule is or what their wages should be, at least with respect to the minimum wage. And so we're trying to help on that end as well.
I think that, obviously when you talk about social equity and the new employee, and you've got like smaller businesses, smaller like mom and pop, people that have bootstrapped everything into this business. And we've got like not only regulatory, it's so burdensome with the regulations that we're all dealing with in the legal space, but I think that also as a small business owner, I think, when you talk about like, or when I hear about labor laws or, having a union represent employees, obviously I want to open the conversation, but also as maybe a business owner that, like you said, they're new to business or they don't have the financial means, like how can we offer like worker protections for small business or equity license holders, like you were just talking about, when we're like barely able to maybe financially, make it, and I just would like to offer, I don't know, maybe how, I guess I'm looking like, how can we encourage the smaller businesses to have those protections in place for their workers like they should,
Yeah. Well, I think that's a difficult situation. I've had that conversation somewhat with Amber Center, and because she is a small business owner, and the problem is that, okay, the unions are not going to be trying to organize businesses of that small size. It just doesn't make, it doesn't pencil out for them to do that. But when they get these contracts at bigger businesses, like for instance, the Shrine Group just got a big deal with UFCW for their retail, employees. So that's normally going to incorporate increases in wages. It probably may indicate that there may be some kind of a medical plan or retirement plan involved, paid vacation, paid sick leave, all those kind of benefits that may come with a unionized workplace. And it creates a pressure, somewhat of a downward pressure to all businesses, because employees are going to be looking, seeing that, over here at this, let's just talk about retail for a second, at this retailer over here who's unionized, they're getting X, but you're over here working for the smaller retailer and you're getting Y. And of course, you're gonna want to see if you can improve your situation there. And then that happens by you asking the employer, well, what about raising our wages? What about, helping us with, paid sick leave or holiday pay or the variety of things that they could ask for. And it makes it really tough.
Mhm.
One of the things that I think that the small employer has to do, I think, is the relationship they have with their employees has to be a close one. It has to be one where you're inspiring a level of loyalty.
Mhm.
And with that loyalty, I think comes a commitment of the employee to help you, to work with you, to make that business go and grow. And maybe to grow to the point where, yeah, then they can get, those wages and benefits that the competitor with the union contract is getting. But from the perspective of enforcement agencies, it's not, our job is to protect employees. And so, in the normal scheme of things, what's happening with the employer is sort of secondary in terms of what our mandate is.
Mhm.
But I think, if businesses stay in business, that's helpful to, the folks working, right? Because otherwise, they're not going to have that job. They're not going to have that opportunity. And I think there is a lot of opportunity in the cannabis industry to move forward, to move up, to cross, from one type of work to another type of work, to move from, working in a cultivation room to maybe get into the manufacturing processes or the lab or the extraction, to learn all those other skills, and then reach another level of pay, above and beyond what you started out with. So, one of the things is that we're doing something here with the cannabis industry that we don't do with the rest of traditional agriculture, and that's provide that education. And part of that reason is that there is, with regular traditional agriculture, they already have organizations inside of it that provide that type of education from a different perspective, no doubt, than the one we would provide, but they still have that. And I think the best thing that we've been doing, and I think can continue doing, is to provide that education, is to help them not fall into those scenarios where they're going to be facing those fines and penalties. And that's the way we can, defray some of those costs that they might suffer from outside of the competition that they're going to be having with larger businesses. So
That makes, yeah, that is great. I mean, providing education. So how is it that you stepped up to the plate to be the educator after all these years you've been with,
Well, I think that's part of it. I think because of that, lengthy background I have in the agency,
Mhm.
they had a lot of confidence that I would be able to go out there without needing any support, as it were, and be able to discuss, the various topics, the various angles
Mhm.
of the law. I mean, when I give these trainings, I've been giving trainings also to, which I didn't mention in my bio, I've been giving these trainings also to employer counsel, the council representing cannabis businesses, and that may deal with employment, labor issues. My presentation with a 25-slide PowerPoint, it takes me about 3 hours to do that. So that's the kind of, and that's not even getting, as far into it as I could, but that's, I think indicative of, from my perspective, indicative of my knowledge base, at least in terms of it. So, and I volunteered to do it. I thought it'd be interesting. I thought it'd be very different from anything else I've done, and I've done it for, everything else for a very long time. And, this gave me opportunity to what I perceive to be is a different kind of employer that had a different attitude about the employer-employee relationship and about their employees, that you might normally find otherwise in agriculture and maybe in other, industries. And so I thought, why not? It sounds like it's could be very interesting, maybe even a lot of fun, and it'll get me to parts of the state I've never been to before. Like I've never really been up to the Triangle before I started doing this work, and so and that was very eye-opening in ways, in terms of the real presence of cartel-run illegal cultivation businesses, and the damage they do to the environment through their operations, and also the fact that many of their employees are folks who are trafficked, and so there's just a tremendous amount of need to try to support the legal industry versus that kind of stuff. So.
Right, the need is definitely there because, like I had watched a webinar that you had spoke about, going from the legacy market to the legal space, because they are in this kind of this the legacy space where there's not too many rules, and to switch over then into the traditional market or the legal space where now we are highly regulated and you're an employee, and I think it's very important, of course, that they've got someone like you that is now bringing that information to them. I just, and then I also heard you say, I thought it was kind of interesting that, you've been in the agricultural space for so long, but you were saying how there were, the cannabis space is paying better wages. So you've got like maybe a labor shortage because now people are starting to want to work in the cannabis space. I mean, I just read on Leafly yesterday that there's like right now in the US, like 428,000 jobs, produced in the legal market right now across the United States, which is incredible. Yeah. But, I found that really interesting though, too, and how it's going to obviously affect other crops.
Right. And generally speaking, yes, in California, there is an agriculture, a labor shortage. And it ranges, it varies from, region to region in terms of how large it is, but even in, the salad bowl of California, which is the Salinas Valley, even there, where wages are going to be somewhat higher for employees in regular ag or traditional ag, there's still a labor shortage there. And of course that's been compounded by, the pandemic. It was existing before the pandemic, but with the pandemic it became even worse, even though agriculture and including cannabis was considered an essential business and essential jobs. Even then, that was still an issue. And, and I think because those positions were still open, it actually allowed another avenue for the pandemic to spread, amongst farm workers, right? Because they work in close quarters with each other, and it took a while for the efforts to educate on COVID and educate on the vaccines, and then to provide the vaccines to the farm worker community, which has traditionally had, and this also I suppose also applies just in general to the cannabis industry, but traditionally has had a very strained relationship with government, and especially at the federal level. So, so it has had its impacts on that as well that way.
Very interesting. What would you, as far as just, worker in general, what would maybe the hazards or health effects that they are dealing with in the agricultural community and just in cultivating cannabis in general? What are you seeing?
Well, we haven't, one of the things that we do protect employees about is their ability to raise with their employer issues regarding working conditions. And of course, a major piece of that is health and safety. And it focuses on not necessarily an actual, it has to do with their perception actually of that there is a health and safety danger going on at the workplace. It doesn't actually need to actually be a concrete thing.
Okay.
You know, but we protect them from being retaliated against by an employer when they raise these issues. But what I've heard, and I've attended some, now that course, generally speaking, health and safety is purview of Cal OSHA. And but what I've heard in attending some seminars on health and safety issues is that, yeah, there is concerns about, you know, what you're inhaling if you're if you're spending all day in cultivation rooms, you know, for that an 8-hour period, day in and day out, you know, week after week, what are you inhaling? What is that impact on your lungs, on your entire system? So a lot of science is going on with that. A lot of data and research and data is being collected on that. Another issue is what are the impact of the lights, of the LED lights, if you're in there. There are certain lights, I understand that there are certain lights that are specifically designed to kill mites. And they have some kind of germicidal effect as well. But studies have shown that they actually negatively impact vision, you know, and in fact I think I've heard that it can also ultimately over time lead to blindness. So, you know, and if you're using those lights, or those lights, should those lights be something that are banned or somehow restricted? Should it be part of the health and safety requirements that certain kinds of goggles be, you know, provided? Or on the other issue about breathing, you know, certain kind of you know, mask be provided for that? You know, and so those are things that as I understand it, there's still ongoing research, that it's still so new because of the fact that of the felony status at the federal level, where most research usually comes from, you know, has been restricted because of that status. And only now are they starting to open up and allowing for those kind of studies. But, you know, UC Davis with, I believe it's AgSafe, is doing some studies now in these areas, and certainly you know, those folks should be ones that you reach out to, and to get more in depth on their findings in these different areas of health and safety.
Does anyone have any questions from the group tonight? Would you like to submit any questions? Do we have any in the chat? Just looking here.
I was just wondering how many years or how long it's been since you started working in the cannabis industry. If this is like a new thing, like in the last 2 years, or if it's
No, I started in 2017.
Okay.
So it's been about 5 years now.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
it's
wow.
been, I think the last couple of years, you know, well, I really like doing, you know, in-person, you know, face-to-face talks. I don't mind if it's a group of just 5 cultivators, or, you know, 500 cultivators, or whatever kind of the audience might be, and, you know, one of the NCIA or CCIA events. You know, it's all good to me, you know, in doing that. But once COVID hit, you know, we had to, of course, everybody had to pull back from those kinds of events, and we were doing a lot of stuff over Zoom. And in that period, we've also started working more with localities that have permitted cultivation, and working with them to reach all their licensees, all their cultivation licensees. But even beyond that, you know, all their licensees, because of the partners we have, DFEH and Cal OSHA, because the health and safety issues cross, you know, the whole gamut of the industry. Issues of sexual harassment, of discrimination, you know, they cross the entire industry. So being able to speak to a group that may only be partially cultivators still works for me, because if I can get the word out to them, maybe they can get out the word to their fellow cultivators, you know, or at least direct them to contact me, and I could do something else with them, you know. So that's, you know, I see it all as all being positives.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So are you a one-man show? Do you have a team that's helping you? It sounds like you need some help with that.
Well, I'm pretty much a one-man show.
Big state.
Yeah, it's a big state. So before COVID, yeah, I was probably spending a majority of my time on the road. Like I said, I didn't mind doing that because it got me to, environments and parts of the state I'd never been to before, and seeing a lot of that natural beauty that's around the state that I'd never been exposed to before in those, whether I've had to drive, to get to, various places up north. And I didn't mind doing that. So, but, I think as we go forward in time, and more efforts to unionize takes place, then I think probably, yeah, I may need more help, right? Because there could be a lot of things going on at one time around the state, and I'm, can't split myself into pieces. So
Yeah.
can't clone myself. I guess that's the way to say it these days.
Yeah. So one last question from me. How do you advise cannabis cultivator labor related issues with the special emphasis on the labor peace agreement requirements? Are you informing them of that as well?
Yes. Well, I always make it a point to talk about labor peace agreements. Not so much about the state requirement, 20 people, 20 workers, and if you're going to get your 20th worker during the calendar year, you still have to, move forward on a labor peace agreement. The fact that some local jurisdictions have maybe a requirement local 10, in order to trigger it, and some are looking at going down to 5 in order to trigger the labor peace process. What I talk about is the fact that a labor peace agreement, outside of the fact that in order to get your license, both at the local level and the state level, you're going to have to sign a labor peace agreement when you reach that whatever required level is, and that you're going to be providing the union or unions access to your workplace in order to talk to your employees. Outside of that requirement, it's like any other contract. It's negotiable, and what I've been seeing is that employers and unions have been negotiating to include other things into those labor peace agreements. One of the things that I've seen at the industry outside of agriculture is, if the National Labor Relations Board covers the industry outside of agriculture, they are participating. They are now working to educate employers and educate employees about their law. I'm now working with them and try to bring them into when I'm doing panel presentations, bring them in to also speak, because there are differences between their law and ours. And the main difference really is with respect to how unions get certified to represent employees in collective bargaining. There's only one option under our law, and that's a secret ballot election. Under the national law, that's one of the options. The other option is to the employer can voluntarily recognize the union if it's convinced that the union has majority support of the workers. And so what we're seeing in these labor peace agreements outside of agriculture is an agreement that says that the employer will recognize the union and bargain with the union if the union can show the employer that they have sufficient support amongst the employees. So those are additional steps that don't normally occur in the regular factory setting where you find most unions representing employees in under the national board. Even though an employer may recognize a union, they don't necessarily agree to terms. They're going to engage in fierce negotiation over those terms that may never reach an agreement. But here, what these labor peace agreements are doing is stepping around that issue and actually agreeing to a framework for a contract as part of these labor peace agreements. But that can't happen and should not happen under an agreement in cultivation, because that would be against the law because of the way our law is set up. As I said, workers have to vote, yay or nay, I'm being represented in a secret ballot election. And and no negotiations and no recognition can take place prior to that vote, and that the union has to win that vote. So that's kind of like the main differences there. Oops, I forget that. I'm in my office and I forget that at a certain point in time, all the power of lighting goes off. But anyway, fortunately, in the office, I still have lighting. Well, one of the things that we do want employers to understand that with respect to labor peace agreements, is they cannot pick and choose who to sign with. They have to, if more than one union comes to you as an employer and says, I want to sign an LPA, a labor peace agreement with you, you have no choice but to say yes, and then go about that business of figuring out what's going to be in there. Also, you cannot favor one union in terms of the terms of the agreement that you're giving them, as opposed to what you're doing with another union. Essentially, the best practice is to give everybody the same terms. So once you sign with Union A, if Union B comes along, then you pretty much have to get, my suggestion is to give them the same terms, because if you differentiate between them, it's against the law to favor one union over another. You have to treat them all the same. So that's another thing I talk to employees about when it comes to LPAs. Another thing I talk about with respect to the labor relations is reminding employers that you cannot ask their employees about what they think about unions. You can't ask them what you talked about to an organizer. You can't ask them what other employees said to the organizer, or what you yourself said to the organizer. All those things are against the law. And so, there's sort of arm's length kind of thing when it comes to unions and employees, that the employer really has to stay out of it. And so, so that's kind of the focus I have when I talk about labor peace agreements. But I also talk about what happens after a union wins, and if the employer goes through the appeals processes and the union is still upheld to be the winner, there's a key difference between us and the national board. We offer mandatory mediation, which basically means essentially if the union and the employer do not reach an agreement within 6 months of starting negotiations, the process can be turned over to a mediator, and that mediator will arrive in a collective bargaining agreement. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what's going to happen. Outside of California agriculture and the rest of California's cannabis industry, that doesn't happen because federal law does not have a similar program. Essentially, in the rest of the industry, you can bargain till hell freezes over, never get to a contract, and all that happens to the employer is a slap, essentially a slap on the wrist. But we have because of the efforts of the legislature, efforts of past governors like Governor Brown and Governor Newsom, a system has been set up that is designed to foster collective bargaining, that is designed to help the parties reach an agreement. And so that's what's going to happen.
Okay. I am learning so much, quite honestly. Thank you.
Well, that's
truly. Thank you for
what
your
I'm
time.
here for.
Yeah. I'm glad we're taping this. We've got more people that need to see it, for sure.
Yeah.
So do you have any more questions or comments, Candace, or anyone in the group?
No, this has been really informative. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here and sharing that knowledge. I know we have a couple of folks on here that are very supportive of the labor union. So this is great information.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for what you're doing for the industry as well.
Sure. Let me just add that if you would like the representative from the National Labor Relations Board to come in, I can help arrange that. If you want somebody from Cal OSHA to come in to talk about those health and safety issues, I can do that. If you want somebody to talk about the issues of discrimination and harassment, I can help you get that person in as well. So just let me know and I'll help you make it happen.
Thank you.
Sure.
I greatly appreciate your time and all the
Anytime.
energy you're putting into this too. Thank you.
Anytime, and please let the other normal chapters know I'm available. And, you know, if they'd like to get my 2 cents worth, I'm happy to give it.
Most definitely. Yes, we will pass your name on to LA NORML for sure. Won't
Great.
we?
Thank you.
Yeah.